Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast. Got another listener success story for you guys. This time out of the great state of Tennessee with Mr. Cale Stancil. Cale, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good. Glad to hear it. Jacob, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing Scott. Well, that was with Cale. Cale killed a giant buck, which, if y'all are watching on YouTube, is the deer on the far left side of the screen, the pedestal mount. Huge deer. But
Stud.
Cale, you were mentioning to us earlier, and I want you to kind of go into it. You actually live in Georgia, but you killed the deer in Tennessee on some public land. Give us a little bit of your background when it comes to like hunting. Kind of how did you get brought up into hunting, and maybe a little bit of your past career background, because I think it's
That's
kind of
interesting.
Well, I'm 55 years old, so been around for a few years. I spent 33 years in the submarine force as a submarine ordnance officer, and I come from Georgia. So I grew up in the foothills of the mountains of Georgia, and now I live in southeast Georgia near the Kings Bay Naval Submarine Base. And my buddies and I, over the last 15 to 17 years, we've been just trying to get together somewhere, and we just landed in Tennessee, and we've been hunting there now. This year will be our 17th year, and so we've already got the trip planned and everything. So we're anxious. We always are.
Awesome. Well, yeah, and you were mentioning something else earlier. That if you're active duty or just if you have a military ID, there's some special opportunities in Tennessee.
Yeah, so we chose to hunt Tennessee because with the active duty military ID, you can get a free license to hunt in Tennessee, which was you now I'm spending $300 something a year for an out of state license in Tennessee. So that was a big draw for us, and there's a lot of public land up there too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One reason I wanted to talk to you is just one, your past career choice is interesting, being that being a whitetail hunter. How do you balance your passion when you are like living underwater for a significant portion of the year? I think you said earlier you've spent like 4 years of your life underwater working on subs, which is crazy. That's crazy. So how do you balance that?
I didn't even know how many years I'd spent underwater, but at one of my, I think it was at my retirement ceremony, my captain said that he had gotten in my record and counted all the days up, and he basically said that this man has 4.5 years of his life under the water, and if that's not dedication to someone's country, I don't know what is. So yeah, we I've made 18 deployments on submarines and one deployment on an aircraft carrier over to Operation Iraqi Freedom, and each patrol is, somewhere in the neighborhood of, 50 to sometimes 90 days or more. I mean, during COVID, they were doing 140-day patrols, so that was interesting. But the ballistic missile submarine has two crews, a gold crew and a blue crew, and you rotate. And the ship's it keeps the ship at sea for 90% of the time when you have two crews, because you'll come back from a patrol, they'll spend about 30 days of upkeep, and then they leave, and then they come back, and it's just a 105-day cycle or 115-day cycle. They've changed it over the years, but yeah, so that's what I did.
Yeah, and you can see the wall. People viewing on YouTube can see the wall behind you. You've had a lot of success. I mean, you've killed a lot of really nice deer, and going on deployment. Getting stationed in places like you mentioned, I think California, where you're not whitetail hunting out there. How do you reconcile that, having such limited times to hunt? You're saying you're making these trips and you got 7 days a year to hunt, and you're doing it in that time frame. Did you guys just pick one area and just kind of hammer that year after year after year so you could build history with it?
Yeah, we've spent coming up it'll be 17 years, but the limitation with being active duty and being deployed, there were many years where I didn't even get to hunt. But during the years, and I like to say, sometimes you're on shore duty, sometimes you're on sea duty, and when you're at sea, you typically you might have some time in port during deer season and get to hunt, but for the most part, you miss those years. And then when you're on shore duty, it depends on how hard the jobs are. But we made it work. So a lot of the deer on the wall, they come in groups. So there's only one deer on my wall that did not come from either 96 to 98, 2006 to 2008, or 2020 to now, and that's basically after retirement. So Yeah, I mean, we would be able to do like a week of leave. So usually you'd get about 30 days of leave a year, and a lot of times you spend most of that with your family. But we always just tried to carve out some time during deer season, and so I got real good at hunting the pre-rut and the rut, and that's primarily where I like to stay is in the pre-rut and rut. Now I do hunt outside of that, but that's my bread and butter is pre-rut and rut.
That okay, I got you. Interesting. And I always just like to highlight that too. I mean, obviously, we have the utmost respect for guys like you guys who served. One of our first listener success stories, Andrew from Kentucky. He's active duty, and I get to talk to you guys. I really enjoy it, man. I respect you guys. I appreciate your service, and so it's just cool to get to. For me, listening to a guy you were like working on subs for so long, that's so cool to me. I'm like, I can't believe he listens to my podcast. Like that's crazy. So how did you
I
find
absolutely
out
love
about
it.
the podcast? Like, how long have you been listening? And how'd you find out about it?
I think I've been listening. I've been listening to either the podcast or the YouTube channel. I've been listening to the YouTube channel since you started posting all your videos on there. But I really wasn't a podcast guy. I did pick it up right before, and I think the Josh Driver was the one that really got me going. And I was like, yeah, I need to make this a favorite. So I started listening to it, and really for the past 3.5 years, I haven't done much but look at YouTube, and I've got probably I don't know 50 hunting channels that I got saved that are my favorites. So and you guys are pumping them out, so I'm looking at every one of them as soon as that comes out.
Yeah, we've upped the numbers here lately
Oh
as
yeah.
far as stuff we're putting out. It's been a lot. It's been a lot. I want to talk about this buck that you shot this year in particular. You sent us some maps of it. I actually had the opportunity to talk to you at the Mobile Hunters Expo in Dalton, Georgia this year, and got to meet you and talk about this deer. And you even sent us some maps talking about the setup, and it sounded like a very technical hunt. And so I want to kind of dive into that and how this hunt went down. So I guess kind of take us from square one. How did you know about this deer beforehand? Did you have history with him? Like how did it all start?
So this was my first time ever hunting a thermal hub, and I learned over the past 2 or 3 years I've been trying to get up enough energy to try to go down in a thermal hub, because when I was growing up I used to get busted all the time down in them, and I just didn't understand how they worked. And most of my success has been up around the upper one third parts of higher ridges and things like that. But I'm always looking for, not every thermal hub is going to be the same. And I'm always looking for where a lot of things kind of come together in one place. And so I like maps. I like to study maps a lot. I, for a lot of years, I would try to pick out spots where either a lot of drainages would come together. I would try to pick out spots, where I call it the pitchfork ridge, but some other people have described it as when you have a lot of long, skinny, parallel ridges that parallel each other. I'm usually looking for three ditches on one ridge that all come down into one spot, and only one ditch going up the other side. I'm also looking for a lot of, you might call it a wagon wheel ridge up on top. Some people call it a topographic hub up top, but where a lot of secondary ridges come up to a main ridge and all meet in one place. And so I got to studying all the thermal videos. I mean, Jacob had a couple of videos with I believe Bo Martonic. Those are really really good. I think I've watched them 3 or 4 times. But I just started seeing a lot of people killing deer in these thermal hubs, and I knew that there were a lot of them up there where we go. And the topography would start somewhere around the 300 feet mark and go up to like 600-700 feet. And so these are ridges, and sometimes there's some steep parts and sometimes there's not. So I shot that buck, I guess the third buck over there 2 years ago, on a rifle hunt. And after that hunt, I put a bunch of cameras up there and started getting just multiple bucks, big bucks. And so I knew there was a big community scrape up there, and it dumped down into this thermal hub. And when I got to looking at my maps, this thermal hub was kind of a double thermal hub. So there's like two ridges that come down. One's a little shy of the other one, but over here there's like three or four ridges that come down, and over here there's only one. And back up to the left was where I had shot that buck, 2 years ago. And I said, after I shot the deer, I said, I'm gonna go down that thermal hub and do some scouting, because I had like 6 days left on my hunt, but I had already tagged out. So I took that time to go down into that thermal hub, and um, I look for a lot of steep terrain, because where you find steep terrain and steep ditches, especially, or drainages, these I call them micro drainages or ditches. When they're steep, they really funnel deer down into a certain point, and you can almost guarantee that if there's a steep ditch, there's going to be a trail on one side or the other. And I'll walk every ditch, and this is what I did in that thermal hubs. I walked every single steep part that I could find, and then most thermal hubs, they say almost all of them have a good scrape down in the bottom because it's a big social hub. And the creek was actually really steep, and the creek. So this thermal hub it's about 100 yards wide, so it's a lot bigger than what it looks like on a map. But I knew that if I walked all those ditches and marked them on my map, and then tried to connect them to that big scrape that was in the bottom, which had and I really like those scrapes with the licking branches that are about thumb size or bigger, and you can just tell. I mean, if it's all the way down to the rocks in some places, and it's been there for a lot of years, and it doesn't matter if you shoot a buck this year on it or not, the likelihood of another buck taking up that spot is going to be pretty good, and sometimes multiple bucks. But I took about a 4-hour day to map this whole thing out, and I walked every deer trail, and I used my tracker to do my marking, and then I turn that tracker into a color brown, and that just signifies to me that it's a deer trail. But I don't journal or anything like that. My maps are my journal. So when I look at a place that I've been to before, I can kind of remember what it was doing. But I went down there, and when I found that the creek was really, really steep in a lot of places, I knew that I needed to find all of the creek crossings. So I marked all of them. And then when I walked all of the micro drainages that were coming down to this place, some of them had a decent trail and some of them didn't. So I would kind of eliminate the ones that, didn't have a good trail, but primarily the ones that had the big rubs and specifically like signpost rubs. Those are the ones that I want to make sure that I'm looking in that direction when I finally come up with the spot. So, I knew it was a good spot. There were two blowdowns down there at the very bottom of that main ridge that came down. And like I said, that other ridge was catty corner coming down like this. Then there was three of them coming down like this. But the cool thing about that main ridge is the western side of it. And this was a southeastern facing thermal hub. So it was coming out of the northwest, going down into the southeast. But that western side was almost a sheer cliff face all the way up through there. So I knew that for like 200 yards up that side, there wasn't going to be much traffic going up and down. And then on the east side of it, I had to go up about 75 yards, but it got to where it was just a drop off. And I knew that the deer were going to have to come off that main ridge right in front of that scrape. So, I'm always looking for the spot within a spot. I've heard some guys talk about that, but you got to be able to access it and get in it. Try not to be detected, and then be in a spot where the wind's going to be, good for you and not so good for him. But a lot of what I learned from your podcast was, that a lot of times these steeper ditches and creeks, they'll actually suck the wind for you, and you don't necessarily have to have a wind, especially in the late afternoon. And that's kind of how I dove in there, and I found a spot it was actually right up next to a steep part of those secondary ridges that were coming down that I knew the deer couldn't come off of. So I was actually up a tree right at where that started. So the deer would have to come down this way or down that main ridge or down that other ridge that came up this way or off that ridge where I shot that buck last year. But there was only one place where he could come off over there, and he had to come through them blowdowns across one of the only creek crossings that he could come across. And even though he was going to be below me about 100 yards when he came into the bottom, he was kind of forced up through there. And on that day, I had a northwest wind, and it was blowing out the the opening of that thermal hub, which was way on down there, like a mile to where you had to park. But he came up through there, and I was over here, and my wind was blowing this way, and he had the wind in his face too. And so it was just a perfect setup. And I was dropping milkweed just to make sure, and it was just dropping right down into that really deep ditch. And that ditch down in the bottom used to be the creek, but it wasn't the creek anymore.
So, Cale, let me ask you this: with that, how close were you set to the ditch?
I was right on top of it.
So it's
not the main creek, but the old creek bed, and it was probably 10 or 12 feet down to the bottom of it. So if you got down in there, you wouldn't be able to see over the sides of the bank. But it didn't have any water, and it hadn't had any water for years.
So I'm glad you kind of brought that up with this setup specifically, because it reminds me. I just got back from the Mobile Hunter Expo up in Pennsylvania, and Bo Martonic was one of the guest speakers. And he actually talked about, like, of his last 5 bucks he's killed in PA, 3 of them has been down the bottoms, like in similar setups to you, and how much he's using those ditches or those creeks as an advantage to be able to suck his scent down. And the deer are kind of coming in potentially, again, with that wind or that thermal in their face, but because he's setting up typically so close to the creek, it's like kind of bypassing the deer, it seems. And it seems like that's a lot of like what you had success with on this setup, based off what you're explaining, is the deer was coming across from one ridge point, kind of quote unquote almost downwind of you, but because of where you were set up, he wasn't going to be able to smell you unless he stepped out right there in front of you.
Yeah, and I picked that tree. One, that ditch was there, and I knew they weren't going to cross it unless they just jumped over it. And I walked the whole thing. There wasn't any creek crossings right there. And then the main creek was over to my left, probably about 50 yards, and there was only one creek crossing, and it was because there was 2 giant blowdowns in there, and he kind of had to walk between the 2 blowdowns, and then he turned up to come up through there. But he was just, I had that perfect wind, and so did he, but he couldn't smell me because he would have had to jump another great big ditch, and I kind of figured he wasn't going to do that just because there wasn't any sign down there.
Now, can you talk a little bit more about this community scrape you found down there? I mean, it sounds like the kind of scrape that not only I get excited about, but Andrew loses his mind over when he finds scrapes like that.
Oh, man.
So
we all do, yeah.
How was the scrape? How did the scrape lay out? I mean, you were talking about like big licking branches, but like, how big was the scrape? And again, was it as simple as once you got there and walked around, it was pretty easy to pinpoint how the deer had to drop down into that bottom, like you were explaining?
Yeah, and I've, like I said, I've hunted the tops and the sides of ridges and secondary ridges for most of my life, but I've always walked down into these. When I start looking at an area, that's why I say a spot within a spot, because when you're looking at an area, that area might be 10 or 15 acres, and it takes a long time to actually go through and look at everything you need to look at. And I do that so I can eliminate where deer might not be coming from versus where deer might be coming from. And so this scrape, and I'll say this, like, I've been diving deep into these thermal hubs now for 2 years. And usually now that I'm retired, I can go up there and 2 or 3 times a year, and kind of adjust camera setups and things like that. Because if a camera's not getting anything, I'm going to move it, but I might not move it very far. I just might move it to another place where I think I might get a good buck. And so this this thermal hub is like a lot of thermal hubs that you're going to find a scrape down there somewhere. You just got to figure out where it's at. And you can look at these new LiDAR maps and kind of guess. And I always guess, and I'll put a couple of marks on there. I use CalTopo and I use Onyx and I use Google Earth and I use Spartan Forge. I try to use everything to my disposal. But on these LiDAR maps, you can generally find a little flat spot down there. And there's 3 or 4 flat spots, and you just kind of need to go look at all of them. But that's what I did. I went and guessed first. And then when I went down there, I actually eliminated 3 of them and found the scrape on one of the spots that I had actually marked, and it was right at the bottom of that main middle ridge that where the thermal hub splits.
So, Cale, also talk to me a little bit about your trail cam strategy in that location. Was it one of those areas that, like, when did you go and scout? I mean, you said you scouted it during that hunt, but when did you put a camera in that spot? And also, did you have that buck that you ended up killing on that camera on that scrape?
So I've never put a camera down in this thermal hub, not even to this day. I just know it's a good spot, and it's going to be a good spot for many, many years. But if I were going to put a camera down there, I would put one on the scrape. And my experience with big scrapes like that, especially social scrapes or community scrapes, a lot of people call them different things, but they get used a lot, even in the off season. So I usually get a lot of bucks that'll walk by a scrape, and they might not even walk through the scrape. They might not check the licking branches, but most of the time during the off season, they're going to check the licking branches just to kind of see who's been by there and when were they there last. So I'll always put a camera on a scrape like that, especially if it's a good scrape. Now, I don't put cameras on every scrape because not every scrape's the same. But this scrape, you hear it all the time, but people say that as big as a car hood, and it was, and you could see that this scrape had been used a lot, and the ground was really hard underneath it. So I knew that it was generational, and I look for generational rubs as well. So when I left that thermal hub and started walking all the micro drainages and stuff like that, I made sure that I looked really hard for those bigger signpost rubs. And I mark every rub. I don't just mark the rubs from this year. I'll mark generational rubs because, during the pre-rut and rut, and that's generally when we're, going to Tennessee, is the those generational rubs is the same trails that those bucks will use. And I don't, I know that there's the likelihood of bucks bedding up on those secondary ridge points was pretty good, but I only found one bed, and that bed was up to my northeast, kind of where that other little hub come down in there, a micro hub. And so that my stand was actually pointing towards that because I thought maybe I could get in there and he'd just come on down there, but it didn't happen like that. He come up from, behind me. But I also will put cameras on those signpost rubs. And then, of course, I'm looking for tracks. I'm always looking for tracks. If I find a big track, especially on a creek crossing, I want to put a camera there as well. But I've found that putting one camera in a spot doesn't tell you a whole lot. So I usually try to do at least 3, sometimes 5.
Cale, one other thing, and I want you to give your own terminology on this because I'm sure there's going to be like YouTube comments on this. How would you describe what a micro drainage looks like, both on a map but also in person?
Yeah, so this thermal hub that we're talking about is 100 yards wide, and I call that a main drainage. And even when it splits and goes off, this one went off to the northwest and to the kind of the north. But those are the main drains. These micro drainages, they're just ditches because the water, when it falls, it's got to come down somehow, and over time it just wears out into a ditch. And so those ditches will, during a heavy rain, they'll fill up with water and they'll drain and then they'll get dry again. And I really like finding the steeper ones. I feel like the bigger bucks will use the steeper ones. Sometimes they'll go right up the middle of it, but most of the time it'll be just right on the edge. Because when they're gaining elevation, they want to be close to something that they feel safe. And I think a lot of those steeper drainages, they'll have a lot of cedars and a lot of uh, thicker stuff, and I like looking for that kind of stuff. The thicker, the better. And I want to know what's on top too. So I wanted to know where the thickets were at and where it was just wide open. And of course, I'm always looking for acorns, especially red oaks at that time.
Now, also, Cale, you mentioned early on that past guests Josh Driver and Shane Parker both have been impactful for you. How so? How have they been impactful for you, and maybe either changed your perspective or gave you something else to think about and look for when you're actually out there scouting and hunting?
Well, the main thing was understanding thermals, right? So, I use, like I said, Cal Topo, and I like to turn on that one layer you can turn on. I can't remember what the name of it is, but it'll show you when the thermals will be dropping, and it shades it really well for you. Specifically, what Shane kind of taught me I didn't know before is, I really think moving forward, I'm going to try to hunt these thermal hubs when I have a very slight wind, up to like 5, 6, 7 miles per hour. Anything above that, I'm probably going to stay out just because of swirling winds. But, I learned about the swirling winds. I learned about rising thermals. I learned about dropping thermals. Sometimes, I waited till 4 o'clock to go in, and I shot the deer at 4:39 that day. So he actually was on the move pretty early, but the wind was out of the northwest that day. So I figured if the wind did kick up a little bit, it would blow my scent back out, to the southeast. And that's exactly what happened. So, moving forward, I'll take note of that, and that's kind of how I will go back into new thermal hubs that I find. And I'm actually running some cameras on some thermal hubs right now that, if it's not the wind that I need, I probably won't go in there. Just if it's a crosswind, I specifically learned that'll kind of kill you, especially if you go in too early.
That's one thing I actually wanted to bring up about this spot was the wind issue, specifically with thermal hubs. That's one of the big complaints about hunting areas like that. That's why Jacob doesn't like to hunt them very much. And I was going to ask if you were just trying to target this area specifically on calmer days when the thermals are going to take over. It kind of sounds like that's what you did with the buck on a day that was a little bit calmer, and that your thermals were just going to get ripped right down, kind of channeled down that ditch. Exactly. Or on days where you're kind of getting that wind angle just right, where that wind is shooting straight down and out of the back of the thermal hub. Am I on track there?
Absolutely. I mean, that was exactly the way I looked at it. I figured that if the wind did blow up to 5 or 7 miles per hour, that it would blow my, out the opening of the thermal hub or the beginning of the thermal hub. But when it didn't, I thought maybe that ditch that I was set up right on would suck my thermals. And it was actually doing that before, very early that afternoon, because that big ridge to my west was actually up around, at the top, it was up around 600 feet, and it dropped all the way down to like 380. So the sun was setting, obviously in the southwest that way. So it helped me a lot with that thermal pull, and that ditch was pulling my thermals. I mean, the milkweed was just going right down into that ditch. So
how did you do that? So you waited for that thermal switch to go in. Did you get further down valley and kind of stage up right there and wait, and you're dropping milkweed and you're like, okay, they're going the right way, now I'm going to push up in? Or did you just have a time where you're like, I'm going to walk up in there at 4 o'clock?
Well, so I'm getting up in age, so I don't, these mile walks and mile and a half walks are not as easy as they used to be. And I'm a saddle hunter now, and I'm a one stick guy, so I use a one stick and a saddle. And I actually came in. I came in from the east down a logging road that was about 2 miles long, and you can't get in there. It's just foot travel only. And so what I did was I dropped down into that hub about 200 yards from where my stand was actually at. And when I got down to where that knife edge was at, I just walked along that knife edge, and I was dropping milkweed as I was walking just to make sure that I had the thermal pull or the wind in my favor, and I did. So I just kept on going, and I usually slow down. When I leave the truck, I'm getting it in gear, but when I get to where I'm about 200 or 300 yards from my spot, I slow things way down, and I just kind of take my time and I listen and I look. I really know. I don't think there's a reason why you should be getting in a hurry to get up a tree. It's more important not to sweat and to get into a spot. And I actually, I put my one stick on the tree and I climbed up to the platform, and I was adjusting, my tether and my rappel rope, and straight off that ridge right in front of me, three does got up and they just jogged up the hill a little ways and then they stopped. So I just kind of stayed put there for a little bit, and I thought I completely had blown my hunt. I said, you took your time getting in here and you did everything right, and then when you got to the tree, you got in too much of a hurry and you've blown it. And so they ran up the hill, and once they got out of sight, I climbed on up and got set in. And actually, a doe came down the the secondary ridge about 100 yards from me, and I heard her coming down the hill. I thought it was the buck because that's where the bed was actually at. The only bed that I had found was up there, and there was a giant signpost rug on a cedar tree up there. And so I got all ready to go, and it turned out to be a doe, and she milled around in there for about 20 or 30 minutes, and thank goodness, but she turned and she went back up to the north. And as soon as she got out of sight, because I was locked in to her, and I looked back over my left shoulder, and this big boy here was standing just before those two blowdowns and where he had to cross the creek at. And he came on across the creek, and I was like, thank goodness, he's coming on in. And for whatever reason, there's a lot of coyotes and there's a lot of pigs and there's a lot of things that will spook a deer. So when a deer blows, I don't necessarily, think it's me all the time. Sometimes it is me, but I knew she was upwind and my thermal pull was good, so I knew she wasn't blowing at me. But when she started blowing, he stopped, and now he was at about 40 yards. No. He was about 25 yards at this point, but he had come from 50 to 25 real quick. And then he stopped. And I was crossbow hunting this particular hunt. And I still hadn't gotten my crossbow off because I'd been staring at that doe for so long. When I turned and saw him, I wanted to make sure that any movement didn't catch his eye because he was literally facing me. And when he got to 25 yards, thank goodness he was kind of behind a tree a little bit. His head was, so I just eased up and took my. I got a Raven crossbow. I pulled it off that was my retirement gift, by the way, a Raven crossbow, and I was able to put him behind the tree and take it off safety, and he only stayed there for about 30 seconds, and he was about to go back out the way he came. But as soon as he turned, he got an arrow.
Awesome, man.
Nice.
Well, Cale, as a point of wrapping up here, it's an interesting story, and I'm excited to see how much you're implementing not only what guys are talking about on the podcast, especially when it comes to thermals and these different terrain features, but also going out there having success and compounding your experience to hopefully make this season replicate last year, but always being able to learn. What piece of advice would you give, especially new listeners or new viewers of the podcast, when they analyze and they're like, oh man, y'all are on episode, past, 610 episodes now. What piece of advice would you tell somebody about, getting those small tidbits of information out of each individual episode and guest to try to build their own way of having, success and replicating that success instead of necessarily going all in on one specific guest? What is your piece of advice on that, when it comes to consuming all that content?
Well, that's the main thing right there is there's so much information out there right now that if you'll just start listening to these podcasts and listening, there's so many different, many guys out there are having success. And a lot of guys are doing it in different ways. Some people like to hunt scrapes. Some people like to hunt trails. Some people like to hunt thickets. Some people like to hunt thermal hubs. But just take notes, take notes, and then when you're in the woods, apply it. And you know, walk the ditches and walk both sides of the ditches. Go up one side of the ditch and come back down the other side of the ditch. And if it's got big rubs on it, then leave that trail marked on your map, and then eliminate the trails that maybe you've done for pre scouting on maps. And eliminate those, and you'll start to learn that things come together a lot more than you think they would if you just put some time and effort into an area. And like I said, I spent about 4 hours in this spot, so I think I put 4 miles and probably never left 15 or 20 acres, and just lots of information. So take good notes and figure out what works for you. And then spend a lot of time honing your craft, because there's a lot of good information out there, and 600 podcasts. I mean, you got some time to watch them.
Absolutely. Well, Cale, appreciate you joining us on this segment for the Listener Success Story this Thursday. And listeners and viewers, we'll kick it on over to the ending segment of this episode. So appreciate y'all watching this and listening.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate y'all joining for this listener segment, and we'll get on over to the next segment.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap up that listener success segment of the podcast. Man, we got a lot to talk about right now. It's been a minute. Last week, we did a special Thursday episode. We didn't have our regular outro that we normally do. So we got some catching up to do, man. Jacob, you've been fishing. We're going to hit some Q&As here at the end. We've been scouting, fishing. Got to talk about this dude right here, this big old 10-point. YouTube viewers can see that.
Good deer.
Real good deer.
Good 2-year-old.
Yeah, pretty good 2-year-old. I'll tell you what, man. It'll be a good one next year.
It'll be a good one this year, yeah.
Anyways, all right. Jacob, how you been?
Been good. Been real good. So don't really have anything to say on like the scouting aspect. Just been fishing a whole bunch, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. With a couple different trips we've done, and maybe try to do a fishing trip with some of you guys next year if y'all want to do it as well.
Yeah,
so,
stay tuned for that.
Yeah, stay tuned for that again. But anyway, you've had some exciting, I guess, scouting, trail camera endeavors, and all that kind of stuff. And really, that all happened was last week or 2 weeks ago now.
Yeah, I guess it was 2 weeks ago now. I went out, first of all, just to hit this real quick. Steve, the 10-point, is alive.
He's back.
Finally Cody got a picture of him. We're starting to get a little concerned. So on the hunting club, I mentioned that some of the members out there have gone in and planted summer plots. Mm-hmm. And they kind of mentioned it last year that they were thinking about doing it, but they never said anything, this year about actually doing it. But we just went out there and they had planted, and the deer were really hammering them for a little while back when it was still kind of drought conditions. And we put cameras on all those fields. We were getting bucks on them pretty consistently. And then we started getting all this rain. And dude, it was like you flipped a light switch. They quit going to that period. And it's cowpeas or something like that they planted, some kind of legume that they were just absolutely hammering. It's like, it's not soybeans, but it's like soybeans. And they were browsing it super hard. And when it rained and all that stuff, I mean, when I found it, dude, they had eaten it. It was just like little stalks, like that big, had little leaves growing off, and they just mowed it down. You could see the bare dirt. And by the time I had gone back out there to kind of readjust some of those cameras, all of it was over my knees, and I couldn't find browse pressure on it. And the deer just absolutely quit hitting it, period. Around that same time, Mike had a couple cameras out on the club on licking branches from last year, and they started hitting those licking branches. We had a couple new bucks show up, pretty nice 8-point that we're thinking about naming Jacob, but we haven't decided yet. And
y'all are very creative.
Listen, it is what it is, man.
Steve's a great name.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's a terrible name.
All the listeners voted and said Steve's a great name.
No, it's a terrible name.
It's a great name.
I talked to my father-in-law about it, by the way.
Yeah.
Everyone, if you haven't been listening, Steve is my father-in-law and also a deer that we're trying to kill. So that was a fun conversation. And anyways,
But what was your reaction? Hold on.
he thought it was funny.
Exactly.
You know, at first he was like, "What the hell?" but then he thought it was pretty funny. I showed him a picture of Steve, and he's like, "That's me." I'm like, "That's you." And he's like, "All right, I'm looking good."
Stud muffin.
What a
dude.
stud!
Yeah.
And anyways, call him Biggie. That's my father-in-law's grandfather name is Biggie.
That would have been another buck.
Maybe we'll call the 8-point Biggie. I don't know.
I don't know if he classifies as Biggie yet.
I don't know. Anyways, so we had a couple new bucks show up there, and you know, well, some guys don't realize this, but man, like they hit those licking branches right now. We have videos of them in velvet hitting those licking branches right now. So it's August 20th roughly at the time we're recording this, and we had them at the beginning of August, and they started hitting those licking branches pretty consistently. I mean, working it just like they would in the rut. They're not scraping the ground, but they're working the licking branches. And so they showed up. All these new deer kind of showed up, started hitting those licking branches, and still the fields are just absolutely dead right now. I'm not getting anything at all on the fields. So I got to go move all my cameras on the club to some different spots. I'm going to go put them on scrapes out in the woods that we know exist from last year and the year prior. And so I went to some public land, went to a new area I haven't been to before, specifically looking for aggressive terrain and specifically looking for those licking branches. So I get out there and I just, I turn on the slope. I'm trying not to say too much. I turn on the slope angle shading on Onyx, and there's some red, up on this ridge. Red being your bluffs, your rock fields, like your just nasty, really steep stuff. And I basically just walk straight to that. And I find a little bit in the bottoms. I find a scrape with a camera on. I find, I walk a pretty good distance. This place isn't known for having like a ton of deer. And I walk a pretty good distance and I find like nothing. I might have found one old rub like the size of my thumb, but nothing fantastic. And there's a huge thermal hub below this ridge system that I wanted to get to because it looks so good. I finally get down into it. I'm looking, can't find a scrape. And then there's some mountain laurel coming down this thermal hub, and there's a beech tree growing on the edge of that mountain laurel, and right there, dude, I'm talking about a scrape, buddy. I mean, a scrape, a big giant scrape, multiple licking branches. It looks like you carved it into the mountain laurel. It's crazy.
Okay.
And I'm like, sweet, I'm gonna put a camera here. I brought a bunch of cameras with me, and I turn around and there's a camera on it already. I was like, oh my gosh. And it's one of those little mini cameras, like little Wild Game Innovations, like the Nanos or whatever they called them. And I'm like, I wonder if this is Shane's camera.
Yeah.
Because I knew that Shane had hunted there. Actually, at first it didn't occur to me, and that it was Shane's until I'd left. Like I was walking and I was taking a lunch break, and I was like, I bet that's freaking Shane's camera. And I sent him a picture of it with the coordinates. I was like, is this yours? And he just sent back LOL. He's like, I forgot that camera was even there. But that actually made me feel better that it was Shane's camera, because Shane knows how to find them.
Oh yeah. Well, the second you told me you found a camera and what it was, I'm like, I'd almost guarantee that Shane's.
It's got Shane written all over it.
Guaranteed it's got to be Shane's camera.
Yeah. So that was Shane's camera that he put out in 2022 and forgot about, because as we covered on the podcast, Shane runs an insane amount of trail cameras. So he loses a couple of them, but yeah, that's his camera. So I'm going to go back in there and pull it for him here in the near future. But anyways, continue past that, trying to get up to this aggressive terrain. And between that scrape and the aggressive terrain, again, like really nothing of substance. I'm not finding a ton of rubs. I mean, there's rubs in kind of predictable areas. The drainage is going up the ridge, but nothing crazy at all. And I'm finding tracks, like punch holes in the leaves. It's got real thick, heavy leaf duff in there. And you can see the tracks, but there's really no rhyme or reason to them. Like it's nothing that I would necessarily hunt off of. Like maybe you could sit in there in December when all the leaves are off and sit on that hub on one end of it and just see like way through there, because these woods are wide open. Even in the summer, you can see really far through them. And so I just kind of bypass all that, start getting up to the aggressive terrain, and it is aggressive. It was nasty, dude. I start crawling up this like rock face thing. It's like a boulder field. It's like if a giant had a big cup of freaking gravel and just threw it down. Like that's what it looks. It looks like you spilled a bunch of rocks, but all the rocks are like this big. So
Remember when I told you earlier when we were at dinner about you not being very descriptive?
hey, that's not what
I
Hey, listen,
meant.
I'm trying to do better.
That's not
I'm
what I
trying to
meant.
do better.
That's
It's like the Jolly Green Giant was carrying a bucket full of gravel and spilled it. That's what it looks
Except
like.
the gravel is probably like 2 foot long boulders.
Yes, that's right. Yes, for sure.
Okay.
So I'm walking across that. Sure, I'm going to get struck by a timber rattlesnake at any moment. Because, dude, I was looking. I was pretty scared walking through that. I'm not going to lie. It had rattlesnake written all over it. And I get across that, and it's like so rocky that I'm like, I don't even know if a deer would cross this. I mean, I'm sure they can, but I'm sure that they're going to try not to. And I get across this boulder field, and then there's a bluff right there. And that bluff is just choked with mountain laurel. And I jump a deer off that bluff. I don't know what it was, but I get up there. There's beds all over it. This is like clearly the cover. And this is in the steepest stuff. You get up in there, and it's on X, it's like red and orange. And it is the steepest stuff, and it's rocky. And so I end up crossing that bluff, and I hit the bottom of it and start following it to where it ends. And coming out of that really nasty, just aggressive terrain is a very faint trail. And there's a little skinny ridge point that comes off this aggressive terrain and runs way down into a bottom. And I'm trying to get on top of that little skinny ridge point, and I'm going to take it back down. And sure enough, as I'm rounding the side of the hill, coming out of that aggressive terrain, kind of following that bluff line to where it hits that skinny ridge point, there's a faint trail, and there are some really nice rubs on it. Chest high on me, like straight up, all the way up to my chest. One of them is a little bit bigger around than like a highlighter marker, and it's snapped off at my chest, ripped in half, snapped off. And there's several of those rubs coming off this. So I go ahead and put a camera right there, watching that trail. And I've got some does on it and everything so far, but no bucks yet. And I continue down that skinny ridge point, and I just start walking straight down that thing. It's kind of like a little backbone ridge. Walk straight down that little backbone ridge, and I get close to the bottom, and finally, still haven't seen another scrape, by the way, since the one I found that Shane's camera's on, and that was like miles ago. Still haven't found another scrape. I get down towards the end of this ridge, and I'm almost about to just dump off the ridge into the bottom and just get out of there. And I'm like, no, I'm gonna work it all the way to the point. And probably about a third of the way from the ridge point going down, I hit a scrape. And there's a big scrape, and then there's like a little secondary one off the side on a different tree. And I walk up to that big scrape, and the licking branch is fresh twisted up. Like just happened, fresh twisted up. And I was like, okay, now I'm feeling like super confident. I'm like, they're coming down this ridge point. And I throw a camera on it. I throw a Moultrie Edge on it, which I was kind of surprised that I had service in there. But I had service. I had enough service to get that camera up and running and put it on there. And 2 nights later, had a couple nice ones show up. So pretty good. 2 pretty good 8 points. One of them's pretty nice. I'd shoot both of them.
You said there's one in the background that looks good, but you can't see it very well.
Yeah, I only got one video of him, but there was, I think, 4 bucks total. One of them was like a spike or a 4-point. There was a 8-point that's pretty nice. He's probably about like that deer. And then there's another one that's bigger than that. Just a really solid 8-point. Like a deer I would absolutely not hesitate to shoot. Not a giant by any means, but a really, really nice deer for sure. And then there's one in the background that looks bigger than all of them. And I just got one video of him kind of going off the backside of the hill, and you can just barely see his frame at night. It's at like 4 o'clock in the morning. But they came through and they did the same thing. They hit that licking branch that they're doing at the club. And, this property is, several hours away from the club. And so, yeah, it was pretty cool, dude. Never been there before. Just went in completely blind, new area, specifically seeking out that aggressive terrain. Kind of like what we've talked about with some past podcast guests recently, and boom, found the bucks. So I'm pretty excited. I'm going to go back, put more cameras out. But as I was leaving that scrape, I go down into the bottom underneath that little ridge point that the scrape is on, and under that, it's like this big wide bottom. I've never seen anything like it out there, and it's like choked out with cane. It's like it's a mix of river cane, sparkleberry, and greenbrier all growing together.
Sounds great to walk through.
It was not fun to walk through. As I'm walking down, I hear something get up out of it, bedded in the bottom, and a velvet buck runs off. And I get a great look at him. He's like, nothing crazy. He's like a 5-point or something. He's a cool buck. He's a Jacob cool buck. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go walk down there and see what like what he was bedded in, and it's just that it's that sparkleberry, river cane, and briar all growing like up on each other, and it's just like it's some of the best looking habitat I've ever found. And there's rubs in it. There's white oaks and red oaks growing in it, dropping down into it. So for like a
You say dropping down into it. They're not dropping now.
they're not dropping now, but they will be.
Okay.
They will be. And it would be a spot that you could probably kill one in bow season in there if you wanted to walk all up in there and try that. But I think early gun season, I think it would be a freaking great spot. I think it'd be a really good spot. And I walked down to where I jumped that deer from, and that's where I found this dude right here. Pretty nice 10-point deadhead, just laying there. And so this area is pretty thick.
Don't turn them like that. Turn them like this. Oh, yeah, there you go. Spin them around. There you go. When you start flipping them on the y-axis, you get a little confusing. Yeah.
What would he look like if he's trying to fight you?
Yeah, no. But so he was just laying down there.
Yeah, he was just laying down there in the middle of that bottom. And while the area is kind of thick, if you're up on either of the ridge tops, you can look down into it. And even in the summertime, you can see in there pretty good. But in the winter, you'd be able to see a pretty long ways in there. And the spot he was laying, he wasn't in the thicket. He was kind of outside of it. There's like a big opening, and he was right in the middle of that.
Yeah.
I mean, like right smack in the middle of it. And his nose is gone. He's been chewed on by squirrels. I found other deadheads of deer that like we confirmed what year that they had died and how long the skull had been out there. And just basing it off those, which is like, obviously it's a complete guess, but I'm going to guess he's been out for at least probably 3 years. I found some that have been out for 2 years and they were in better shape than this. So there's really no telling, but you know, I feel really confident having found this for a couple reasons. One, this is a great deer. I would shoot this deer, and you know, while he's obviously dead, I'm sure he's got some relatives hanging around in there. This bloodline is in there. You know, this nice, just symmetrical, freaking 10-point, like beautiful buck. You know that those genetics are in there, so there's probably another deer that looks like him. But also, if he was laying there in those woods for a couple years and nobody found him, that tells me that nobody's been in there. You know, especially in a spot like that where you could see him from pretty far away. That just tells me that nobody has been in there and picked this sucker up.
Or there's some guys in there killing some huge deer, and they ain't going to pick up a deer like that. Like, I'll leave them. Let the squirrels chew on them.
That's always possible, too. But yeah, he's a great deer.
Yeah, have you ever found like a small deadhead and you just like hang him up on a tree or something?
Yes.
I've done it a couple times. Like, I'm not packing this thing out, but I'm just going to hang him up.
Yep.
Let people know that, you know.
Let them know.
Something stuck him up in there.
I think I know what killed him. He's got a little hole back here, like a little brain abscess.
Not a 22.
not a 22. Somebody in there squirrel hunting put one in the eye hole.
Yeah.
No, yeah, it's a pretty good deer. So I'm excited about that. I put it on our Instagram story, and somebody messaged me about that, and they were like, "Hey, do you like when you find a deadhead? Does that tell you it's a good area?" And I said, yeah. In my mind, I'd be curious on other people's thoughts on this, maybe in the YouTube comments. But in my mind, if a buck, let's say like, I think he died from this brain abscess. He's got a little hole in the top of his skull. So that's probably what killed him. But let's say that someone makes a bad shot on a deer and it doesn't die for like 24 hours and they can't find it. Well, in my mind, that deer is going to go to the safest area that he knows, and he's going to, retreat into the area that he feels the best. And, he ends up dying there. And so you end up finding his deadhead there a couple years later. So there's that aspect of it. I think there is something to that. But then also just the fact that if that deadhead's been laying there for a long time and no one's found it and picked it up, that gives you a pretty good, estimate that not even a turkey hunter's run across him.
Yeah. Well, it's like that 7-point I found on another piece of public like 4 years ago,
Yep.
that we had on camera like 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And he disappeared, and I found his head 2 years later, I think. I think it was 2 seasons later.
Yeah, it was 2 seasons later.
And he was exactly like just over 3/4 of a mile from where we had him on camera quite a bit. And he was in a little hardwood SMZ, hardwood drainage, running up, around some pines. And he was just laying there. There's bones all over the place, but he was just, the head was just laying there. And I was like, that tells me, again, like you're saying, like nobody's walking through here, because someone would have picked that deer. Same thing with that.
Yeah.
Unless some dude's just like, whatever. But someone would have picked up that other head, and I'm like, well, no one's coming in here. And I started like looking around, and was like, yeah, you didn't find any, like, kind of like this past Monday's episode with Lance Smathers. about like when you're hunting, if you're finding like a lot of trash or like sign of other hunters, like clearly there's been like activity there.
Yeah.
When when you're finding, like if you find a deadhead, you're not going to find any of that stuff in the area. Like, to me, it's like a good commonality. So it's like, it kind of tells you like there's nobody either actively hunting in this area or they're actively coming through this area. And I'm saying like, I try not to leave trash in the woods. Like if I pack something in, I pack it out. Like I don't use disposable water bottles. I have an Nalgene bottle, and if I have a sandwich, I stick the wrapper, the Ziploc bag back in my bag. But a lot of people don't do that.
Yeah.
And people put thumbtacks on trees. They just
flag and tape.
Whatever it is about Mountain Dew bottles in Alabama, a bunch of those. And every now and then a guy's packing in a Busch Light or a Coors Light or something like that.
Copenhagen cans.
Yeah, for sure. So like if you don't find any of that and you find the deadhead, and it's also associated somewhere close to like something that's like either hard to get to distance wise or because of like the aggressive terrain, like just steep, across a lot of creeks, whatever, super thick stuff. There are certain commonalities of like where you're going to find deadheads and where you're going to find like that security cover that the deer are going to be in.
Yep.
And there's not going to be a lot of people there.
Yeah, definitely.
Which can make it for a good place to hunt, potentially, based off the right conditions.
Yeah, definitely. Big confidence booster for me.
Yeah.
And we can confirm that with the deer you're talking about because he died with the rack that we had him on camera with. So I can't remember. That was like maybe 2019 or so when we had him on camera.
Yeah, I found him in 2021.
Yeah, and so it was that same rack. And then same thing when I joined the hunting club. So he had been there for 2 years, like your buck. He'd been laying there dead for 2 years.
It's not my buck, just a buck we had on camera. But
Well, the one that you found.
Yeah.
And then when I joined the hunting club, I found me and you walked up on that deadhead out there. And Cody had that deer on camera, and that one had been out for, I think, 2 years because he sent us the videos and pictures they had of that deer from 2 years prior, and is the same rack and everything. And so, you kind of get an idea of how they age or whatever. And, I mean, this one looks pretty rough, so you never really know, but I'm saying that's got to be it.
Well, I was going to say, and actually, you think about it, because the one I've got, there's squirrels all around, and it's chewed up a little bit. The nose is perfectly intact.
Yeah.
Like the nose, everything's like, it's not like like that skull's like, it might be older than 3 years.
It probably is, man. Like
because its whole nose is completely like just broken down. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, it's hard to tell, but it's just one of those things kind of going back to like, if you're finding deadheads, especially if like decent deer, good deer, like it's just a security area that, again, for whatever reason, those deer feel safe. Now, then again, you could find a deadhead. Like we don't have in the deep south, and I forgot the biologist. I can't remember who we had on. It might have been Michael Chamberlain. It might have been somebody else. We were talking about EHD, or it might have been actually no. It was Mark Turner.
Okay, yeah.
And we were talking about EHD. Well, we have EHD little outbreaks in the deep south, but like our deer, and Mark talked about this in one of those in the episode we did with him, that our deer are specifically like genetically modified to like be able to overcome EHA a lot better than a lot of the northern strain whitetails. So like right now they're having a big kill off in Illinois, Indiana. I think Kansas is getting hit pretty hard. Iowa's probably getting hit pretty hard because of the droughts, where deer just dying left and right. Mm-hmm. Well, in the south we'll have like little pockets of that, but like these deer are like genetically, able to overcome a lot of that just based off their genetics. So I don't think you're going to find like, it'd be something like if you found like a head like this around like a water source, okay, maybe EHD got killed kind of maybe earlier in the year or something like that. But again, based off like where he died at, it's like it got killed at some point later in the season, more than likely, or died for whatever reason, whether he was wounded or just, I don't think he died of old age, but probably got wounded or something happened to him and ended up just nobody was able to recover him. So
yeah,
it's just something to think about. And especially if like you're in a hunting club, dude, you go walk through a pine thicket in a hunting club, you're probably going to find some deadheads because a guy shoots a deer on a food plot. He doesn't find any blood. He actually probably made a decent shot on the thing.
Yeah.
Decided not to get a tracking dog. A deer ran out 150 yards, died, and you walk in there the next year or 2 years later and you find his dead head laying there.
Yep.
Like it happens all the time. Like Mr. Benny talks about that rabbit hunting.
Oh, yeah.
Like how many deadheads they find in rabbit.
That's where I find almost all my, and sheds too.
Yeah, and sheds.
One cool thing too, by the way, that you can tell about these deer, if you're just trying to learn like about when it might have died, is you can look at the pedicles, so the base of his antlers where it meets his skull. And obviously that's where they shed their antlers from. I've seen in February when we've killed, like Colton shot a buck in February one time, it was the first year they did our February season. And that was in an area where they rut pretty early compared to the rest of the state. Mm-hmm. And that deer, he wasn't going to shed, but you could see where his pedicle had started deteriorating. And there was a very defined line all the way around that pedicle. And so, like, looking at this deer, there is not that at all. So that tells me he died. He didn't die in the springtime or anything. He died sometime probably during season. Again, you just never know, but that's just kind of a little inference you can make. That's kind of interesting. But yeah, very, very cool. Very neat little setup here. I'm interested to see if I can find some of his buddies or some of his descendants.
No, I don't want a descendant. I want one of his brothers.
It's like the 10-year-old buck.
Where's that 7-year-old, 8-year-old buck?
Yeah, he's probably a half rack right now.
Maybe.
He's so old.
I don't know. You never know.
Yep, could be. But yeah, so that's I've got really high hopes on that spot. I think you're going to go in there and scout it too at some point, and we're going to put some time into it and just see what we can get into. We got some more cameras put out, so
yeah,
pretty excited about that. Also, we're going to be hunting in like 2 weeks, dude.
I know.
We're going to be hitting North Carolina.
We're going to be freezing to death.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be so weird because you were telling me like today in Alabama, I think it got up to like 89 or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was like, I think it was mid 60s this morning.
Yeah.
What was it up there, kind of like in that region, the state that we're going to hunt in?
It was, I looked this morning. This morning it was like mid 40s, mid to low 40s, depending on where you were. And there's something about that first good cold front of the year. You're never ready for it. And it's like, you're just cold. Like, you're just cold. And we were joking about it earlier last year, that first cold front that rolled through. It's like, you layer up and everything, and you're still like, I don't know, your body's not adjusted to it yet or something. At least for me, that's how it is for me. Like those first couple of cold.
I wouldn't say it's not. I mean, you're not adjusted. To me, you kind of over layer. Like you feel like you got to put on more at that for like that temperature range than maybe you would like come December when you're kind of used to it.
Yeah.
Or especially January. But yeah, definitely it's gonna be super weird. But I'm very eager because I'm interested in seeing like the habitat, like some of those mountains, and kind of been looking at it like on Onyx. Like it was funny. I was editing videos like 2 nights ago, and it was like freaking midnight. And all of a sudden you text me and I'm like, I'm like, you're always in bed by like 9 o'clock. Like, what's going on? And you're like, dude, I can't sleep. You're sending me like Onyx pins and stuff. And I'm like, okay.
I know, dude. Listen, like to the listeners out there, it's a lonely world being fired up at this point in the season because Jacob doesn't get fired up until we're like on our way to the spot. You're like, oh yeah, we're gonna go hunt. It's gonna be cool, And then you'll be like on your way, literally on your way to the woods, and you'll be like pulling up Onyx while you're driving there, looking. You're like, oh, dude, look at this spot, and then you get fired up. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to move you along. I'm like, hey, dude, it's 2 weeks to go.
I'm not saying my standards very high on that hunt. I'm just going for like just have a good time, kill some stuff. That'd be awesome. I'm not going in with the mindset of like we're gonna go out and kill a couple of really nice bucks because we're only gonna be there for a few days. But my thought is go out there, learn the habitat, and maybe not this year, but maybe next year, come back and actually spend some more time and actually have a better understanding of how everything lays out.
You have a little faith. Yeah, that's not a winning attitude right there. Let me tell you.
Listen.
That's not a winning attitude.
You wait till I get there.
That's what I'm saying. Like you're so passive right now. And then when we get there, I know you're going to be like.
That's like the same way I feel with Kansas. It's like I've looked at it a little bit more on Onyx. I'm like, this is awesome, but like, let's just figure out when we get there. And I'll just spend 5 hours in the truck driving between spots. I might just call you like, hey, I'm sleeping in the truck tonight. Yeah. Spot 2.5 hours from the Airbnb. Is what it is.
And then Jacob's not going to kill anything.
Maybe not. Who knows? You just gotta find it, sit on it. But yeah, no, that's gonna be cool. Both temperature wise and also the experience. But it'll probably be. I'm trying to think. I don't know exact elevation. I need to look at it again on Topo. I don't remember like paying attention to the numbers, but probably it's gonna be the highest elevation whitetail hunt I've done. Probably for sure.
Yeah. No, I think it will be definitely.
Yeah, for sure. So, well, yeah. Of course it is. If it was 44 degrees this morning.
Yeah, like I don't know what you're talking about.
Like,
yeah, these are like actual mountains. Because even when we hunted Wyoming, you're higher elevation, but I don't know if we were that high. Because Wyoming in general is higher elevation,
Oh, we probably were higher in Wyoming, even though it didn't feel like it. Just on this, because I think we were hunting around like 4,000 feet in Wyoming, but it's all flat. I mean, you ain't walking up anything. It's just that's the elevation. Right?
Yeah, you're just
it's big plains and river bottoms, which you're sitting at 3,500, 4,000 feet. Mm-hmm. So that's okay. I don't classify that. That's
whatever.
Western whitetails.
Whatever.
Michael Pike's favorite hunt of all time. 150s behind every tree. He says
that's terrible. That was terrible. But yeah, we're going to be kicking things off in North Carolina. So very excited about that. We're going to be doing some interviews on the way up there.
Oh.
We got some good ones lined up.
Yeah, got some bangers. So trying to weed out the other, or like not weed out, but trying to work in the other guys based off schedules because it's been kind of crazy. But that's kind of the exciting thing going into the falls. We're going to try to focus on doing a lot, if not majority of our interviews, kind of like once Andrew's full time in person and travel around and, interview guys in person. So we'll be doing that in this North Carolina trip, interview some guys from for sure Georgia, for sure North Carolina, for sure Tennessee, trying to work out South Carolina, just still figuring out, still haven't heard back. So
Schedules.
yeah, just trying to figure out schedules, but it's going to be super exciting trying to figure out how all that'll work out. And hopefully y'all are going to enjoy it because it's going to be better conversations. We'll be in person with everybody. The video is going to be better. The video podcast is going to be better. The audio podcast is going to be better. It's going to be much quality audio because we're all going to be in the same room. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. So that's going to be a fun tune-up hunt. And, in Georgia last year when we hunted North Georgia, we only hunted for 3 days?
I want to tell you, I think 4 days maybe. It was 4 days, but I think we really only hunted 3 of them.
Yeah.
Because how stuff kind of lied or worked out. But I'll be honest, going into this trip, it's kind of like how I felt going to our Georgia trip 2 years ago when we hunted with the tether, or not the First Light crew. Thinking Josh Hilliard because he's at tether now, but with Josh and the guys. And I went in. I was like, "Oh, this will be good." Then get out there, start finding some stuff. I'm like, boys, it's on.
Yeah.
It's on. That's the most frustrating thing. Like an early season hunt, like that hunt specifically. We're finding some decent sun, but it still was kind of lackluster. Like you weren't finding a lot of whip rubs. Like it was, it'd be kind of hit or miss, and there wasn't really any feed sign yet. Like there's oaks dropping, but it was still super hit or miss. But it's like, dude, every morning when me and Hunter was filming with me and Hunter were like driving to the spot. Dude, we would see a shooter buck, I mean good deer, every single morning an hour and a half before daylight.
Yep.
Crossing the roads. Now, it wasn't nowhere near the public. We were driving by some private land, and it was like, I'm like, dude, there's another one. I'm like, God, dude. I'm like, man.
I forgot about that.
Dude, it was insane. I was like, God. I'm like, okay. And we get out there, and our best opportunity, I think, was that's the first actual morning hunt. And I think me and Hunter, my fault, blew the pooch. Because was it morning or no, it was morning. Yeah. We walked in, had cut these big buck tracks, hunting, kind of going back to Land's episode from Monday, habitat diversity, where you had there were some big hardwoods, creek drains kind of ran through, and then next to it, and it was all in the public, next to it was a pine stand that had been select cut probably 4 years ago, so it was real thick underneath. And then it kind of, again, transitioned down to that creek bottom. So there's 3 big edges coming together. And there was an old fence row running down. And I cut these buck tracks going back and forth. It looked like the same buck tracks going back and forth across this fence row where it was going back and forth kind of up and down the creek. And, I mean, just huge tracks. And we sat there the first evening, didn't see anything, came back the next morning and repositioned kind of back up in the pines a little bit. And as we're walking in, and I didn't think about this because we didn't have wasn't running cameras or anything. Should throw a camera out. As we're walking in, I just see we get within, literally 40 yards of the tree I want to get in, this big pine tree. Right on the edge of this fire break, this fence row. And I just look and I just see these big old set of eyes, and I just see part of his beams coming up like this. I can't see how they round off because there's cover, but I can just see his beams come out, and his eyes, wide set eyes, and his big body. I was like, oh God, that's him. And I was like, and Hunter, I think he tried to film it, and it's super hard to film in dark like that when you get the light on the deer. And I'm like, we're just gonna climb up the tree. I'm like, this ain't gonna work. And he's like, oh man, that probably isn't the deer. And we climb up the tree, daylight. This is 45 minutes before daylight, and he's right there, and he was bedded down on the next to that fence row, in his little brush pile, and he stood up when we walked off, or walked up. Then he ended up easing off when we were climbing the tree. Got to 9 o'clock, and Hunter looked over at me. He's like, "Yep, that was 100% the buck, 100% the buck." Freaking was right there. I was like, "You're kidding me, dude. That sucked." So,
yeah. All part of the experience. That was a fun hunt, though. That was a really fun hunt. We saw a lot of deer on that hunt. I killed a buck.
Deer. Yeah.
Yeah, I killed a buck. That was fun.
What you learned from that broadhead you were shooting that day?
Man, I can't. I think it was a VAP
VPA.
VPA
Little two blade thing.
It's like a little two blade, and
double bevel.
Yeah, double bevel two blade. Just going for.
Can I tell you my experience real quick? Nothing. I think VPA makes some great broadheads, but
Yeah.
like this one and how the shot happened and everything, you shot him like real close.
I shot him at like 6 feet.
Yeah,
and he was on the hill, so like it wasn't a bad angle or anything like that. I mean, he was like right next to me, and I mean, I just freaking drilled him right behind the shoulder, and it sounded like you shot a 2x4. I hit the offside shoulder, and I knew instantly. I knew because I saw the fletching just bury up. That I knew that I had hit the offside shoulder, and he went tearing off. I was hunting this cane break down in a creek bottom, and he went freaking tearing off down through that cane break, and I was like, got him. You know?
Well, when we were tracking, let me just tell you something. So it was me and Josh. And Josh is with me, and like you're kind of up ahead, like tracking, and literally went to pin drops of blood within like 15 feet, 20 feet.
Yeah.
And Josh looks over at me and he's like, what the hell did Andrew shoot that deer with? And I was like, man, it's a small little fixed blade. And he's like, that's why I shoot mechanical.
Oh, we're going to get everyone arguing.
Oh, yeah. Get everyone in the comments about fixed blades versus mechanicals. But he's like, dude, I ain't tracking pin drops of blood. And it was because that was rough. All the camera guys and everything, they're crawling through, like kind of like.
Dude, that was like the most stressful track of my life.
I was too.
Because they had a full film crew and everything there. And I'm like, you idiot. This buck was at like 6 yards or 6 feet. I mean, he was like so close to my tree. He was almost right underneath me. And I could hear him like popping stuff in his mouth. I don't even know what he was eating because I don't think the tree was dropping.
No, you said you found it was like water oaks or something that were dropping or something.
Oh,
he was feeding on some
yeah.
kind of oaks. You had jumped a buck out of that spot the day before.
The day before, yeah. But anyways, he ran like 75 yards and died. I mean, the shot was great. And what happened is when it buried in the offside, the broadhead was like stuck under the skin, and it just didn't break the skin on the offside, and so you just had one hole, like one small hole on one side, a little bit higher up, because you know he was so close, it was such a downward angle, so it wasn't crazy high, but it was a little bit higher up, and it like no blood was just getting out of the entry wound. Really,
I'm telling you, it was one of the most depressing.
It
tracks
sucked,
I've
dude.
ever been on. Like we found the deer.
I hated myself so much.
And it was so hot, dude, because like we're down there, like it's like a sauna in that SMZ, and the sun's like baking the pines and everything around there. And like, dude, we came in with the crew, like excited, hot, like, oh, this deer's toast. We get down there, and it instantly was like
Depression.
there ain't no blood. Like there's barely. I mean, I'm talking pin. Like that's the thing about like those one hole hits, like with a fixed blade, because I've shot a couple deer like with a couple different fixed blades. And it's like if you get one hole, it's like it's just not fun. Period. You get two holes in them, it's not bad.
Yeah, and when I shot him, again being right below me, when he ran off, and I kind of collected myself, I looked down, and there's like a big blood splatter right where he was standing. I was like, "Oh yeah, buddy, you're toast." And he was like, I got him.
Oh yeah,
but the blood trail was just awful. And you know, I've shot a bunch of different broadheads over the years. I've killed deer with regular Muzzy 3 blades. Muzzy Trocar, Q80 Exodus, a Sever broadhead, a Land Shark, and then that little, whatever that two-blade was.
No, you keep saying Land Shark.
It's a Swamp Shark.
Yeah.
The 175 grain.
Simmons Swamp Shark.
Yeah. Big old, like 2-inch cut. Like
you're shooting a hatchet blade at him.
That one performed very well.
That one's ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of not right, a real big pain to sharpen them if you have that little wheel sharpener thing that you can buy from Simmons.
I never could like get it real sharp.
Yeah. You and there's no way it's because that curved blade angle. It's like a concave blade broadhead.
It's like an old Howard Hill broadhead. Like if people are familiar with those. Howard Hill.
I mean, I know who that is, but I don't know what his broadhead looked like.
It looked like one of those.
Okay.
Like he likes that big swept, like concave design.
Yeah.
And that was a good broadhead, but it's just a little heavier than I wanted to shoot. And especially, you know, wanting to extend my range a little bit more, not shooting like 70 yards or anything, but shooting like 30, 40 yards. I just wanted less of a drop. So I went back down to like 100 or 125 grain. I've been playing with those. So yeah, shot that deer in Georgia. Was not pleased with that broadhead. Ended up switching to I think the next deer I shot with a bow was with the Severs, maybe. I think that's right. Yeah, because I killed 2 deer with the with those little VPAs. And
What was it?
on the hunting club, the pepper tracked.
Oh, jeez.
That was another bad one. But anyways,
That's why we get the dog.
that's why we got the dog.
No,
that was a bad situation.
that was.
That was a weird situation. But honestly, dude, like I might still shoot the Severs this year. I haven't switched yet, and we're going in like 2 weeks, so I'll probably just shoot those. But when I'm like thinking real hard about going back to the QAD Exodus broadhead because I just like that 3-blade, dude. I like a 3-blade broadhead. I've always gotten, there's exceptions, but I've always gotten really good blood trails with 3 blades, and I just like a fixed blade broadhead. So I think I might just go back.
Hold on, real quick. You say that.
Yeah.
There was the deer you killed many moons ago. I think you and Michael. No, was it you and Michael Pike hunting a very specific piece of public land in Alabama, kind of up on top of a little mountain?
Oh yeah.
Was that with the QAD Exodus?
Yes.
Was that the one that you couldn't find blood on? And you just walked up on her?
No, I did find blood.
Okay.
That was kind of a hard track because she didn't bleed for like the first, 15, 20 yards, and I couldn't remember where she ran.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I found the arrow, because the arrow was like 15 or so feet down the trail, and I shot her pretty early in the afternoon hunt, and I got down, and when I was looking, it was like right there at dusk, and I think I didn't have a headlamp, and so I was trying to use my phone. Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah. I think I was trying to use my phone, and I had trouble finding the blood, but eventually I just ran into the arrow, and I was off from where I thought she was standing, and then I just walked right to her after that. But yeah, so with that one, that I was upset about the lack of a blood trail for the first part, for the first however many yards it was. I can't really remember now. And that's what got me switching to different broadhead because I really like those QADs. I'm like, let me just start trying some different things
For like a cheaper broadhead
that's readily available.
It's like this one of the sharpest fixed blades that I've messed with.
Yeah, so that QAD, that broadhead, I killed 4 deer in one season with that broadhead.
That one head?
That one broadhead.
You didn't?
No, I sharpened it.
Okay.
I resharpened it after the second one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I shot. I think it was the same season because I think I shot it first and then you.
You got me on that broadhead
because I shot 2 with it and it did well. But it's like, and to me they flew well because they're shorter heads too. They're not like real long heads. That's like the opposite of like a QADX's is the opposite of a Simmons Swamp Shark.
Yes.
It's like one is this gigantic blade
shooting a kitchen knife at him.
It's like an inch and I don't think it's an inch and 7/8. I think it's Swamp Shark's a little bit smaller. I think it's an inch and like 5. I think it's an inch and 5/8 cut. 2-blade, fixed blade broadhead, giant broadhead, super long. It's like 2 inches long. And the QAD, it's like, I mean, just short little stubby 3-blade. It's really thick blades. It's really sharp too. How do we get on this topic? Talking about mechanicals. Oh, it was Josh talking about.
Yeah.
You'd be like, man, that's why I shoot mechanicals. I want a huge hole in that deer and just blood everywhere. But yeah, anyway, so that's super fun little tidbit. But
the old Simmons Swamp Shark, 175 grains. Yep, that's right.
Yep.
Because really, like I really want to try out something like an iron wheel broadhead, with like a 2-blade, 1-piece broadhead with some bleeders on it. I would really like that. But my only thing about those is like, first of all, I don't want to spend a fortune on broadheads when I'm going to be shooting it into chert rock anyways.
Yeah.
And 2, they're not readily available. So like, it's nice when we're on a trip somewhere, and if you just like whatever the situation is, like if you just need some broadheads, because this happened to Pike a couple years ago in North Alabama. He had a couple broadheads. Like you go buy a pack or 2 packs, and you've got like 3 or 4 broadheads. I know some people have a lot more than that, but we're irresponsible, so we don't have that many. And like Pike, he had like, I think he'd shot a doe or something, or he like missed a deer. He had to go get more broadheads, and he went to a Walmart and he just got some Swackers or something. And it's nice to be able to just go to any sporting goods store and have them there available for you.
I got a different thought process. Okay. Or just buy 10 of them and keep them in your bag. I'm like, I got enough for a while.
Yeah. But yeah.
I mean, because either one, it's like, I get that, but like, I'm like, yeah.
But also when I'm like exploring, like, here's the thing. If I'm shooting, especially when you're changing up broadheads, if I'm trying out some Q80 broadheads, they're like whatever they are now, like $45 a pack. Like I'm not gonna go and spend $200 on broadheads when I'm not sure that I'm gonna shoot this long term.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. But when you shoot them and you're like, these are sweet, get some ordered, baby. Like this, because I've got some iron wheels, and our buddy Greg Mayhair, who's been on the podcast, he shoots iron wheels. He uses them for elk hunting, and he shot deer with them. He doesn't like for deer. He's like, you don't bleed. He doesn't shoot the wide heads. I know they get the wide heads now. He shoots the standard. I think he shoots the standard solids, the SS. That's the ones I've got. I don't have the VIN. I've got the SS standard solids, and he's like, they just don't bleed. He's like, they're super sharp, blows right through a deer, but he's like, it's just not a very big hole, and he's like, there's just not a lot of blood that comes out of the deer. He's like, the deer, you hit him right, the deer ain't gonna go very far, like at all. But he's like, it's kind of frustrating if you're in thick cover. Even if the deer goes 80 yards, 100 yards, he's like, you're still pin drops of blood trying to figure that stuff out. Because he says he still has success, like really good success with just a Thunderhead.
Oh yeah, dude, classic.
Is a Thunderhead 3 or 4 blades?
It's a 3-blade.
Is it? Okay.
It's a classic, just 3-blade broadhead. The classic of all classics. The old Thunderhead, baby. Anyways, yeah, I think I'm just gonna probably stick with the Severs for now. Might go back to
See, those aren't readily available.
Well, I know.
You're going to get your.
That's one thing I don't like about them.
Okay,
that's one thing. Because listen, like let's say you go to North Carolina and you've got like 6 of them, and it's not.
Is it getting Wild West?
I mean, like the doe I shot last year, I shot her twice. I mean, like things happen.
I get it.
But you're on a hunting trip, and like, especially if you got doe tags and buck tags, you go through 6 broadheads pretty quick. You got to put an extra shot on one. You miss, like whatever happens. All of a sudden, you've run through 4 or 6 broadheads. What is this?
The Geraldine First Baptist archery shoot?
You can't say anything.
I know.
Up there in Tennessee, how many times did you shoot that doe in Tennessee?
3 times.
Is that how many arrows did you have?
3.
Okay, there you go.
No, you're right. 100%. No, you're 100%. But they were all fixed blade. You just took them out, and they're like, oh, they were ready to roll.
Hey, they were ready. Shoot another deer one. I mean, pull it out, shoot another one.
I mean, I won't go to that story. Y'all go listen to that episode. That's long time listeners know that story that Tyler Malone told about me. But I mean, my thought is like, dude, if you're gonna go on like any of these trips, like when we go to Kansas, whatever you decide to shoot, you better have 6 to 8 broadheads.
What are you saying? It's gonna get Wild West?
But you're telling me, you're like, well, I don't really know. Like you're shooting the Severs again.
Yeah.
It's like once you kind of figure out, shoot you a couple of deer before we go out there. If you like them, get you a couple others, throw them in your bag. You have them just in case.
Yeah.
Keep it simple. Because that is the frustrating thing. Like if you do have like a, like I think actually I got a great story on this. When I first started bow hunting, I've bow hunted even like when I was like in high school and stuff, or I got more into it like when I was in college. I remember I got hand-me-down bow I had, little high country carbon mountain light, whatever, little carbon bow. And I went out on some local piece of public land. I had 1 arrow and 1 broadhead. Okay, I only had 1 arrow. That's all I had. Like
you're like the Barney Fife of bow
all
hunting.
the other ones I blew up. Like this, I'm like 18 years old. All the other ones I just blew up in the backyard, just
skipping them off rocks.
Yeah, just whatever. So I went out to hunt this little SMZ. Climbed up, whatever. Had some does come in. Just outside of my range. I was trying to, 30 yards and in. They were like 35, 38 yards. I was like, just, pass, whatever. They kind of ease off. Then I had some bobcats come by. Okay. It's the only time in my life I've had multiple bobcats come by at one time. It was 3 of them. And 2 of them were fighting each other. I think it was 2 males and a female, and the 2 males were fighting over the females, what it seemed like. And they got literally up what I'm calling the female, started climbing up my tree, okay? And it was like climbing up the tree, and the 2 males are fighting. Well, I'm like, I'm going to shoot one of them. Because I'm thinking I'm getting this sucker mounted, dude. I've always wanted a bobcat mounted. And, dude, I come back to full draw, and this bobcat is not 12 yards. And I'm already thinking in my head what the mount's going to look like. Okay. Like, I'm already thinking, I'm going to get it posed. I'm going to get a squirrel in its mouth or something, like whatever. And I come back to full draw, and, dude, I punched that trigger so hard, and I'm trying to watch it hit that bobcat, dude. And I shoot right over the top of the bobcat, just flinched, and it went right on top of the bobcat. And the bobcat stopped, looked at the arrow, looked up at me. And it was
he's like, dude.
It flicked this little nub of a tail and just went back to walking. I was stuck there with no arrow. And I'm like,
you just fling a knife at him.
I'm like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. Like, why am I out here with 1 stupid arrow? and shot it. And then he could have had the 190-inch buck come by me. I could throw the bow at him. That's about it. Like my arrow's down here and buried up in the dirt. So yeah, good times.
Good times.
That's why, I know guys that I have a 5-arrow quiver and I carry 5 arrows with me. And yeah, it's heavier and everything and a little bit bigger. And I like to take my quiver off when I get in a tree. But like, I know some guys are like, man, I like a 3-arrow quiver. I'm like, I get that. But I'm like, 3 arrows, one's in your bow, you're going to shoot, you have 2 backup arrows. I'm like, it's kind of like a magazine, like in a gun or something. I'm like, if I can have multiple rounds, like if my rifle can hold 5 plus 1, I'm bringing 6 rounds. I'm putting 5 in the gun, putting 1 in the chamber, open the bolt, and throw another one in there. I'm going to have, max capacity. And I just feel like with a bow too, like I'd rather have a couple extra arrows if I can, if you're going in there just for whatever reason.
Definitely.
Getting a sounder pigs, go shoot some pigs.
Definitely agree. Anyways, real quick, talk about that fishing trip and your idea.
The fishing trip was awesome. So, our buddy Wes Moe originally had me out on a fishing trip back in June. That was a good time. Then we went back out to another one, and we had another one booked early August. And then Daniel Williams got me on another trip within a day of each other. Okay, so it was like 3 days of hardcore fishing. The first trip was a 24-hour charter we did out of Apalachicola, Florida. And first off, it was unbelievable. Big bottom fishing trip. It was a group of guys that have been going for like 15 years, the Yoder family. And Daniel's gone. This is like his 3rd year to go. I got, he got me on the boat and everything. And dude, it was an absolute blast. We were out there, fishing for 24 hours. I'm talking like we were we drove down, we went to Dothan, stay at Daniel's brother's house. By the way, Daniel's brother Barry has a Cybertruck.
Yep.
I've always thought they were like, I'm like, dude, these are the stupidest things I've ever seen. In person, the thing is sick, first off. Riding it is like in a spaceship. It is the craziest thing I've ever been in. Like, super comfortable. Listen, I'm not going to lie, I'm a little fanboy now. I'm like, dude, they're pretty sick. Like, I ain't spending 80.
You saving up?
No, I ain't spending 80, 100 grand, and I don't have a place to really charge one right now, so I don't want it. But it was sweet to ride in. We drove, like, we were in it for like 2 or 3 days. Like, when we were fishing all places, like, we went 3 hours to the beach, 4 hours over to Destin or Orange Beach, and came all the way back to Dothan, and it was sick. But, and it about caused like 7 car accidents because everybody's on their phone filming it as we're driving
Everybody's
by.
rubbernecking.
Like you get way too much attention that thing.
They're really impressive in person. I saw one in downtown Birmingham the other day, like in the middle of downtown, and it was like blacked out. You know, you got like a custom paint job and everything.
No, vinyl wrap. They ain't painted it.
Well, okay, vinyl wrap, whatever. And tinted out windows, and dude, like literally everybody, everyone on the sidewalks was like in unison, just like staring at this thing.
That's how when you're imagine riding it.
Yeah,
and literally everybody that drives by you's got their phone out the window filming.
They're like, holy crap, the Cybertruck.
We went to like a Culver's because all the guys in the truck, they'd never had like the Culver's cheese bites, whatever they call them, cheese curds. Anyways, we went through, and a woman in the drive-through, they had us pull up. I get out to go to the bathroom. This woman behind us like yelling at me, "What is that? What is that? What kind of car? What is?" I'm like, "Geez, woman, calm down." Like, but yeah, it was. Dude, every place we stopped, he had charged it like I think twice on the whole trip, and guys would just pull up. Like this dude pulled up in like a Dodge 2500, got out slicked back like a mullet, and Barry was like, "Oh, this might not be good." Come to find out he was a Tesla owner. And he's like, "Dude, it's so sick to see one in person, man. This is awesome." And it's crazy. This guy's got this mega cab, Dodge 2500, and he's like Tesla guy. He's like, "I got one ordered, man." It was so funny. I'm like, he didn't fit the stereotype of what I thought of a Tesla owner being. But anyways, that was fun. But we went fishing. I went fishing, and a big bottom fishing trip, dude, and cleaned up. It was unreal. Just fishing 24 straight hours. The boat sleeps. There's like 15 or 18 bunk beds downstairs. We had like 20 people on the boat, so some people like swap out shifts, just sleeping a little bit. They had a big green egg, cooking food. Like literally every 5 to 6 hours, they had something on the grill. Like
out in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico.
Out in the middle of the Gulf. I mean, dude, we're way out there. And dude,
you're like what, 60 miles out?
I think about 45, 50.
Okay.
But we are way out there. They're cooking, you're fishing, captain, all the deck hands. There's like 3 deck hands on the boat. He's just moving from spot to spot, bottom fishing, reef fishing. Daniel Williams is, using his speed jig, just wearing out the grouper. Like he was catching a scamp grouper left and right. It was crazy. And, Caught my biggest red snapper. It was like 18 and a half pounds, something like that, which I did not, when I first hooked it, I'm like, I don't know what this is. But it, gave me a run for my money. That's what's funny. It's like, dude, saltwater fish, and you've told me this.
Yeah, dude.
They pull so much. It is like, it makes freshwater fish. It's like, oh, you're going fishing for minnows, dude. Like a bass does not get me excited anymore. Like 8-pound bass. Like I've caught an 8-pound bass. That's awesome. It's fun. It ain't nothing like a saltwater fish. Like it is
Of the same size. Too.
or smaller.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, you hook into like we were catching like these white snapper. They couldn't be 4 or 5 pounds. Mm-hmm. And you thought you had a 15, 20-pound fish on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying,
For
man.
about 30, 40 seconds. And then finally they kind of give up and you bring them all up to the top. And you're like, okay, wow, that's cool. He's going in the cooler.
Yeah, I know. You think you got a way bigger fish on than you do.
We filled up. They had 4 fish boxes in that boat, big fish boxes, and we filled up 3.5 of them. Like a total of like 3.5. It was like almost like 1,000 pounds of fish we had, and it was just like, it was unreal. Giant mango snapper, black snapper, dude, freaking like 10, 12 pounds mango snapper, awesome. But anyways, so we did that, and the next day we did 24-hour. It was rough, really rough. Fishing, lack of sleep. I slept for like 2 hours on the boat and then got woken up by Wes Moe coming up next to me, giving me like a thumbs up while they were taking photos of me laying down on a bench, sleeping in the one of the rooms.
Classic.
But then the next day we did another fishing trip, did a 12-hour charter, and Daniel caught his first cobia, which was pretty sweet. Caught some more red snapper, and a couple other species we caught. Just really fun trip. But what we talked about was, and I was talking to Daniel about this, and seeing if any of you guys out there, any of the YouTube audience and or the audio audience would actually want to go do one of these 24-hour charters with us. Again, we can get like 20 guys on the boat. We're talking about, I've kind of brought this up to Andrew. Daniel's all on board about doing it. Trying to get you on board. Seem, pretty maybe there. Andrew might be there or not. I don't know. You interested in doing it?
Doing what?
24-hour charter?
I'm not even going to answer you.
Okay.
Keep going.
Andrew doesn't like saltwater fishing. No, I'm just playing.
Oh, my God.
But we're talking about potentially trying to see what the interest would be if any of you guys would want to go out there with us and actually do like a Southern Outdoorsman 24-hour charter. Just hang out, have a couple of podcast guests there, on the boat with us, hanging out, cooking out, and just having a good time and just fishing like the whole time. It'd be a sweet spot. So if y'all are interested, shoot us an email. Don't do it through social media. I mean, yeah, you can leave us a comment maybe on YouTube or something like that, but shoot us an email at info@thesouthernouttdoorsman.com and just let us know, like, in the subject line, fishing trip, something like that.
Yeah.
Just to try to judge,
interest.
Yeah, judge interest, see how many of you guys are interested in.
Because there's limited slots. So we got to know how many people would actually be interested in doing something like that. And then we can kind of plan it for next year.
Yeah.
Do like a late summer reef fishing trip.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bob fishing trip. But the crazy thing is we caught 2 black tuna while we were out there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Dude, and one of them was like 20, I think it was 21 pounds, which is funny. It wasn't the biggest fish on the boat, but the biggest fish that we could keep. We caught a couple gag grouper that we couldn't keep. They weren't in season. That were pretty big. But one of the guys caught a 23-pound snapper, which was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Just doesn't make sense proportional wise. But that tuna, one of the tuna was like 21 pounds. The other one was like maybe like 14, 15.
Yeah.
We caught tuna while they were out there. And like there was a couple times they blew up next to the boat, like came up, like someone would reel, their bait up or whatever, and the tuna would shoot out from underneath the boat. And it's like, it's like you don't ever know what you're going to catch while you're out there.
That's cool.
So anyways, if you're interested, shoot us an email. It'd be super interesting to kind of figure out some of y'all's thoughts on it and see if y'all would want to go do that next year, because I definitely want to go do it. Just want to try to figure out. We want to open it up to some of the listeners to come hang out with us.
Yes, that'd be fun, man. That'd be fun. But there's got to be a certain number of you guys interested.
Yeah.
So definitely email us if you're interested in doing that.
Yeah, we'd have to figure out logistics, because what we've talked about this as well, kind of like for the whole like just hangout experiences, like trying to maybe figure out if we could all stay like overnight. Maybe the night before, or maybe the night after, like at a one of the I don't know what you call it, motels around there. Like you said, there's a couple different communities around there.
Yeah, there's like inns, all in Appalach. There's a bunch of places. There's hotels, but there's also like an inn that's in like a big house.
Yes.
And
So we could have like a place where we all stay at the same place, hang out, grab dinner, maybe the night before, get on the boat, go hang out, and then afterwards we all leave out, or maybe do a second night. I don't know.
dude, go hit up Patty's Raw Bar.
Record a
Look,
live
if
podcast.
you know about that place, we'd get along. I love that place. Anyways, go ahead. Record a
I don't know
podcast.
if I like the name of that. I don't know if I like the name of that restaurant.
Dude, Patty's Raw Bar?
I don't know about that.
Listen.
I don't know about that.
It's a sunny place for shady people.
Exactly my point. I don't know about that, my man. This is a PG show, Andrew.
Anyways.
But yeah. Anyway, well, we'll figure out some details. But yeah, definitely let us know your thoughts on it. Other than that, that's what I've been up to. Fishing. Got a cooler full of fish now. So, just get excited for these next hunts. Real quick.
We're sitting at almost 8 o'clock. We got an interview. We got to jump on here.
Oh my gosh, guys, we got a couple minutes. We got to hop off here. We'll catch y'all back here on the next episode from Southern Outdoorsman Podcast. Remember, guys, y'all stay Southern.